Good afternoon. This is the Implementation Board meeting of the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. I am Jeannie McNabb, an employee of King County and one of the staff people for this committee. As we kick off the meeting, I'm going to start with a roll call, and I will just say your names in alphabetical order, and if you can just indicate that you are here or not. Carrie Anderson. Nate Caminos.
Here.
Okay. Paula Carvalho.
Here.
John Chelminiak.
Here.
Helen Howell.
Here.
Okay. Gordon McHenry.
Present.
Harold Odom. Damian Patanod.
Here.
Okay. Adrian Quinn.
Here.
Michael Ramos.
Here.
Sarah Rankin. Okay. Simha Reddy.
Here.
Okay. And Juanita Spotted Elk. Okay. See her, she raised her hand.
Here.
Thanks,
I'm
Juanita.
here.
Great. So with that, we do with 10 members present right now. We do have a quorum, and it looks like Harold Odom has just come on. Harold, we just did a roll call, so looks like he's not on audio yet. And as we kick off this meeting, I just wanted to take a minute to do a land acknowledgement. Seattle and parts of King County are on the unceded ancestral lands of the Duwamish people. The Duwamish people have inhabited this land for thousands of years, and they have inhabited and stewarded this land for thousands of years. So at today's meeting, I just want to let everybody know that this meeting is being recorded, and all the recording as well as anything that happens in the chat is public record. And then Carrie, do you mind reading the public comment piece?
Yeah, give me just 1 second. So we have set aside 10 minutes later today on today's agenda for public comment. If you'd like to provide verbal comment, please type your name and the city from which you're calling into the chat function. I'll open that in just 1 moment. This will allow us to build a queue for that section of the agenda. In addition, you may use the chat function to provide written comments starting now until the public comments section of the agenda.
Okay, and then on our agenda today, we are going to follow up on several items that were discussed at the previous meeting on August 24th. In an effort to help members of this board get to know each other, we wanted to spend a few minutes today going through what we're calling a grounding question, and just to hear you all share what is the origin of your name. So, you know, just a short description of where your name came from or something that's meaningful about your name. And so I will just give an example for me. My name was picked by my parents, but when my father went down to register me for my birth certificate, he added in a second middle name. So I have Jeannie Lee Rachel McNabb as my name. And with that, I'm just gonna do the same thing I did before. I'm gonna go through the list of members, and if you would be willing to take a moment just to share about your name. And I will also do it with, well, I guess I don't know if I should do it with staff. Sorry, I'm new to this process, but let's start with the members. So I think since Pastor Anderson is not here, I think the first person would be you, Nate Caminos.
Yeah, happy to. Good afternoon, everyone. So to start off, before my mother had me, she unfortunately had a miscarriage. She was staying with family while she was heavily grieving. During that time, she had a dream that God came to her and said, "Linda, everything's going to be okay. You're actually pregnant. It's going to be a boy, and you're going to name him Nathaniel." And sure enough, she woke up and in a bit of a craze and said, "I got to go to the hospital." And family was there surrounding her saying, "It was just a dream. It's okay. Calm down." She ended up going to the hospital, and doctor said she was pregnant. 9 months later, she gave birth to a baby boy, and she named me Nathaniel. So I usually go by Nate, but that's my full name there. Last name Caminos. Filipino grandfather was fought in the Filipino World War II veteran, and derived from Hawaii.
Thanks, Nate. Paula.
Well, my first name is Paula Ann. I have 8 names total. My first and last name are hyphenated. My grandmother was heavily medicated when she named me. Couldn't decide and just gave me a bunch of them, gave me every name she wanted. But Paula is just meant to be a little different. I was named after my 2 godmothers whose both names were Pauline, so they named me Paula Ann instead.
Thanks. John Chelminiak.
So I actually get a kick out of the way that you pronounce my name. I would say 2/3 of the family pronounces it that way, Chelminiak. About another third, of which I'm a part, now pronounces it Chelminiak.
Chelminiak.
Yeah, it doesn't matter because we're both wrong. And I know my father always pointed this out, but I was in South Bend, Indiana, where my parents grew up this last fall for a football game. And the waiter came over, and when he took the card, he said, "Oh, Mr. Helminiak," which is actually the way that you say it. And he was from Poland, and so he got a big tip that night. That's kind of the origin of the name. Both sides of the family are Polish. Mother's side, I would be 2nd generation, and dad's side, I would be 3rd generation.
Thanks. Helen Howell.
So I'm Helen Patricia. My middle name is after my mother. My father would tell you my first name is after Helen of Troy. I'm not sure that I buy it. Both my parents are originally from Jamaica in the West Indies, and my father's family came to this country when he was 10, and he grew up in Harlem. And my mother grew up on the island and then immigrated to Canada and lived in Toronto for a number of years before she met my father in New York City when he was home on leave from the Navy. So here they are, having grown up probably just miles apart, but it took them meeting in New York City for them to meet each other and begin a family together. So as much of the story as I could come up with.
Gordon McHenry Jr.
Hi, so Gordon McHenry Jr. Obviously, I am named after my father, Gordon Alexander McHenry. He was born in Tyler, Texas, but grew up in Spokane, Washington. A little bit to Helen's story. Ironically, my mother was born and raised in Terrell, Texas, and also eventually relocated as an adult to Seattle, and they met in Seattle and produced myself and my brother. I understand that Gordon was the name of my grandfather, my dad's father's best friend in Texas. And so that's how my dad got his name, and that's how I got my name. I never met my grandfather's best friend, only heard stories. And happy to be with all of you. Thanks for sharing.
Right. Harold Odom.
So, this is the first time I've been able to test my mic, so I hope everybody can hear me. My name comes from some drinking game in Ireland. I have no idea what it was. And I go by H2O. I'm the second, and I was born on August 17th. I turned 60 this year. And the significance of that is it takes water to cool me down. I should be near earth, water and earth signs for me to be pleasant, cool down, and to be harmonious with the atmosphere. So I'm not sure about the origin. I just know it was from a drinking game. I don't know what the second game, if it was a winning name or if it was a losing name, but I know it was from a drinking game. And that's all I know about the origin of my name. But it's good. I like it.
Thanks. Damian Patnod?
Good afternoon, Damien Patnod. Last name comes from, obviously, my dad, French Canadian, and so they lived up there in Quebec. And my parents debate about my first name. My dad was a Catholic priest and says I was named after Father Damien, who worked with the lepers. My mom says that's not true, and I was named after the priest and the exorcist. So either it has some type of priest connotation, but whether or not it was a real life priest or the priest who dealt with the young lady whose head spun around, the debate continues.
Adrienne Quinn.
Hi, Adrienne Elaine Quinn. Elaine is my mother's day name. I was born on Mother's Day, and my mother became a mother on Mother's Day. And so we usually celebrate together when my birthday and Mother's Day fall on the same date, which does happen every now and again. It did happen on my 50th birthday, so that was a great way to celebrate. Quinn, I am second generation Irish, and my grandparents immigrated from Ireland. And like many of your stories, although they both grew up very close to each other, they met here. My grandfather opened a bar. I don't know whether Harold's parents were in my grandfather's bar, but at any rate, second generation Irish Quinn.
And Michael Ramos.
Michael Joseph Ramos. Michael, I'm the oldest of four boys. My parents named me after the archangel in the Bible. Joseph, Jose Jr. was my father. Jose Sr. was my grandfather. Jose Sr. migrated from the south of Spain in 1922, was a hotel bellhop and a nightclub singer, and sang with the best Puerto Rican singers, he says. And Ramos comes from my grandfather, and sort of a play on the word in Spanish for branches. So Michael Joseph Ramos. Thank you.
And then member Sarah Rankin has joined us since we did the roll call. So I'm just acknowledging that Sarah is present. And then Sarah, do you want to share the origin of your name?
Gosh, I wish I had something interesting to say. My parents did not give me any information at all in typical sort of my family style. I can say that my maiden name is Trineri, no relation to the ice skater Jill Trineri. Rankin is my married name. Only other name related bit of trivia to try to share is that I only have one middle name, where my siblings have two. So that was something I coveted, was the fact that they had two middle names growing up. So now both of my children have two middle names.
And then Simha Reddy.
Hi everybody. My name is, so I go by Simha, but my actual full name is Lakshmanar Simha Dharam Reddy. And Lakshmanar Simha is basically, nobody calls me that ever since I've been born, but that's my official first name. And I'm named after my grandfather. With regards to my last names, Reddy is actually a caste name. So my parents immigrated here in the 70s, and hey, what's your last name? And that's the name that was last. And so that got put down as our surname or family name. But my actual family name is Dharam. So Lakshmanar Simha Dharam Reddy, but just Simha.
Thanks. And Juanita Spadadelg.
Hi, everybody. My mother gave me my name. Her name's Phoebe Spadadelg. Spadadelg was her married name, of course. And I actually got to meet the lady, well, not the lady. I'm named after my mother's best friend, Juanita, and she was Crow. And I got to meet her sister, and I believe I met her once before. My mom introduced me to her, and I got to visit with her sister. And at that time, I was in Montana because I'm originally from Montana. I'm Northern Cheyenne, and that name is also Mexican, and it's the feminine form for John in English. And my son name is not named after me, but I chose that name, Juan. He has the male form and I have the feminine form, and the meaning behind that, it means God's precious gift. So yeah, thank you.
And then just so you all have a sense of the names of the people staffing this committee, I'm going to sway toward inclusive here. So Carrie, do you want to?
Sure. I am the fourth, so I got named by my mother, and I am Carrie Kathleen Claire Flory, and Kerry is a county in Ireland, and my mother is first generation Irish, and so it's supposed to be the most pretty county in all of Ireland, so I'm happy to take it.
Thanks, Carrie. And Jason Johnson?
Good afternoon, everyone. Jason Johnson with the Human Services Department of the City of Seattle. My first name is actually Michael, named after my father, named after his father. But my mother, who already had two Michaels in her life, decided to formally use my middle name, which is Jason. So, you know, anytime my phone rings and someone asks for Michael, I either know it's I'm in trouble, it's a doctor, or it's someone trying to sell me something. So it's a good dead giveaway that they don't know me. Good to be with you.
And Sola Plumacher?
Hi everyone, I'm Sola Plumacher with the City of Seattle Human Services Department. So Jason and I were just talking about this morning, but my parents named me Sola, and whenever anyone asks me like where that came from, my automatic response is it's hippie. My parents are both kind of reformed hippies, and my mom had met and nursed somebody when she was in Vietnam in Germany during the Vietnam War, whose granddaughter's name was Sola, and she really liked that name. And so that is how I came to be Sola. Plumacher is my married name, and my husband is second generation American. His father was from Germany. And so we have a very strong German heritage. I also, my maiden name is also Hintzman, which is German for hunter. And then Plumacher is German for pen maker. So it's kind of interesting, but that's my name. And then I think I always share this with people that my brother and sister are Jessica and Jonathan. So I got the weird name and they're very standard.
Thanks, Sola. And then we also have Dawn Coate on the call who's doing captioning for this. Dawn, do you just want to quickly introduce yourself? I'm not sure the protocol around this, but.
Yeah, hi, this is Dawn. Yeah, IT. Glad to be here.
Thank you. So in follow-up to last month's meeting, we wanted to, a question was raised about the theory of change for the Regional Homelessness Authority. And so we wanted to start with, Sola's going to give you an overview of the origin of the theory of change. And we also sometimes use the language equity-based decision-making. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Sola.
Thank you. So just if you could reference the document that you all should have received in your packet of materials, just a brief overview of the equity-based decision-making framework as it relates to what we're going to talk about today. And in the heading is the theory of change statement. So our theory of change as adopted by the community advisory board for our continuum of care is if we create a homelessness response system that centers customer voice, then we will be able to focus on meeting the needs and eliminating inequities in order to end homelessness for all. So that is the theory of change that we currently operate under in our continuum of care planning process, and that the continuum of care advisory board is another arm of this governing body for our work to address homelessness in King County. As you know, there are, you all are on the implementation board, and then we have the governing committee, and the advisory board really works on the federal allocation of McKinney-Vento homeless assistance dollars through our, to our provider partners, and also tasked with the responsibility of developing much of our planning processes in the past. And so we're in shift with that now, but that's the theory of change that that group adopted. And then in addition, while NIS was doing the work to architect what the regional homeless assistance, the King County Regional Homeless Authority, what it will look like, is they came up with an equity-based decision-making process, and that process is referenced in the ILA. It basically outlines.
Hey, Solik, do you mind just calling out the acronyms just so we make sure everybody knows what you're referring to, ILA and NIS both? Thank you.
Thank you. And so the ILA is our interlocal agreement signed by the governing bodies of King County and the city of Seattle, and is essentially our guiding document at this point. And then NIS is the National Innovation Service, one of the several consultant groups that was brought in to help articulate and explore, I think explore and then articulate what re-envisioning our homeless services response system could look like. NIS spent a lot of time working with various stakeholders throughout the region. I'm sure many of you were engaged to one degree or another with NIS while they were here in Seattle. And they recommended the use of an equity-based decision-making process, which purpose is really to ensure that there's a structure for accountable decision-making, and a process by which we ensure that decisions are inclusive and broadly reviewed. And so there are several different ways where the equity-based decision-making framework kind of comes into play. And you all received, I think, the full report from NIS. And in that it talks about equity-based decision-making in terms of policy decisions and strategy, in terms of business operations, and in terms of hiring operations. And what we're really focused on in this group now is the business operations of the regional authority. And there are three kind of key areas to the equity-based decision-making framework in terms of business process development. And those are participatory budgeting, which really means that we're engaging broad spectrum of folks in the development of budget requests that would go to our funding and our funder entities, King County, the city of Seattle, et cetera, and outlines what that process and framework should look like. And then there's a requirement for a request for proposal framework. And I think initially when this was designed, it was really focused on a competitive selection of providers, ensuring that people with lived experience, people from underserved communities, and underrepresented folks were able to compete equitably with other participants, other organizations within our jurisdiction. And in addition to that, doing RFPs for areas of business to operate the authority. And then the third component is this contractor selection component, where we're making sure to connect historically marginalized and disproportionately impacted communities, particularly people with lived experience in homelessness, are part of the evaluation, leadership, and decision-making process of the regional authority, which you all experience in the implementation board participants, in the governing board participants, and in hopefully in the near future through our racial equity training with the Lived Experience Coalition and the LEAD. So we wanted to make sure that you all had an opportunity to ask a couple of questions about the equity-based decision-making framework, if you had any, and then really want to tee up why we're talking about this today is in relationship to the 6 key decisions that we talked about in our last meeting and kind of getting us prepared for vote today. Any questions from folks?
Okay, I'm not hearing any questions. I saw a couple of nods no. So that takes us to our next agenda item, and Jason Johnson is going to talk through the startup decisions. And so as a reminder, these were initially covered with you all at the last meeting, and we wanted to refresh people's memory on what the decision is we're looking for, and then just to provide some context for those decisions. I'm going to turn it over to Jason.
Jeannie, thank you so much. And Sola, thanks for that overview on both the theory of change and the decision-making framework. I think that, you know, as we move through these early meetings, I think, you know, it's important for us as staff to, you know, bring some of the history of sort of how things were developed and what has been developed. And I, you know, I hope that that's valuable to you as you all are sort of coming into this space and teaming as an implementation board, potentially with different levels of information and understanding about what's in the ILA, what was created by NIS. And so if there are items that you're coming into this space with questions about or that you want more information about, please let us know. We can, you know, in a really quick overview, just like Sola provided, add any of those kind of background materials, background information to your agendas so that you're all operating with a same level of understanding about where we've been and what's been created to support how we move forward. So Sola, appreciate that update. And again, invite any of you at any point to reach out to staff and let us know if there's any kind of background materials that you want this team to provide during your meetings. Today, I'm going to run us through the 6 decision points that were teed up at your last meeting. And, you know, these are interim decisions that will help enable us to hire a CEO, which is a critical first step for moving forward in establishing the regional authority. And, you know, one of the questions that came up at the last meeting was whether these were decisions that you were making permanently and forever, or if these were decisions that could be made and then changed once the CEO is on board. And the answer is the latter. These are decisions for the next 6 to 12 months and absolutely can be revisited and changed as things move forward, working in partnership between the CEO and the implementation board. But the decisions that we want you all to discuss and vote on today are related to some services, core services that we need in place. Those are insurance, payroll services, accounting services, healthcare benefits, retirement system participation, and Social Security. So first, for insurance. There's a requirement in the interlocal agreement that the authority purchase insurance. Based on staff research, we recommend securing insurance through a public entity risk pool rather than using a broker. Insurance risk pools are authorized by statute and provide good coverage at competitive prices. Purchasing insurance through a risk pool would allow the authority to secure insurance quickly without having to issue an RFP. If we need to put out an RFP for services, this may delay the hiring of a CEO. An initial insurance purchase would provide for comprehensive liability, directors and officers coverage, and workers' compensation for the regional authority. So I wanted to just see if on the topic of insurance, if there were any questions, and also entertain a motion and vote.
Hi, Jason. I have a question. You mentioned that if we didn't go the route that the staff recommended, that it might delay the hiring of a CEO. Can you tell us if there would be any benefits to looking at an alternative other than the preference forwarded to us by staff? In other words, is there a disadvantage to this? So I understand the disadvantage to going the route the staff suggests is the hiring, but is there an advantage that we might be missing if we went a different way?
Yeah, I would say the two risks that exist right now are both for the recruitment of a CEO. Likewise, all of you need insurance to participate as board members. So those are some of the risks that we're with right now and not having insurance. But Sola, you had done some analysis on the two insurance options or two paths to get insurance. Do you have any additional information to provide to Sarah and others?
If we were to not go with the risk pool, which is what the staff recommendation is, which allows us to move a bit more expeditiously, we would go with an insurance broker. And that would likely require additional, it would be significant cost for a short-term solution and would require an RFP. We can't just go with the city or the county's broker services. It would be a more comprehensive process.
And so Sola, I think Sarah's question is more about the type of insurance provided through the pool or by a broker. Is there any benefit or risk to making this decision around this pooled resource versus a brokered resource?
I'm sorry, I misunderstood that.
That's okay.
I don't, just looking at the language again. I don't know that there's any more risk.
Yeah, I didn't think so either. And what was presented at your last meeting didn't really flag any big difference between the two. Mm-hmm. It was just that one, we were able to access immediately, and the other would take substantially more time and potentially have a higher cost.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, this is Helen. I too just have a question. Are we talking about the 10 or so different types of insurance that were mentioned in the briefing paper before? All of those, yeah. General liability, auto, workers' comp, umbrella, fiduciary liability, directors, officers, crime insurance, and cyber liability technology?
I think we would narrow it down and we would start with what are the kind of core and critical insurance components for we need board and officer insurance. I think initial liability for the organization and staff. And then we can work with the CEO on procuring the process to procure additional liabilities and other insurance coverages. But we just want the kind of initial board officer insurance and general liability so that we can begin contracting with the authority, because that's another requirement, is that for the county and the city to contract with the authority, they need to have liability insurance in place.
Yeah, Helen, we don't need everything on that list. We might in the future, but for example, the regional authority at this point doesn't own any vehicles. Mm-hmm. So there's no requirement for us to purchase auto insurance.
I guess I raised the question because it narrows it dramatically. If we're talking about directors and officer liability and general liability insurance, It's not this huge
Yeah.
vision. Also, if there's the possibility to make a change down the road when the CEO comes on board, we're not binding ourselves, for example, for a decade or 5 years or anything. It just makes the decision not so intimidating when we right size it, if you see what I'm saying.
Yes. I do. Good point. Gordon, I see your hand.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Sola. I guess a little bit in line with part of Helen's question. If we go for the risk pool and it's on this limited set of initial insurance needs, what term are we likely committing the authority to? Is it like 6 months, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year term? Or does the CEO have the ability to get hired, get on board, and then make a change and without a lot of constraint?
I would propose that we make it a 6-month term commitment to allow the CEO to go through the process to procure longer term solution for insurance coverage and really explore what's going to be needed in the 12-month period immediately following their hire, and then what our subsequent kind of 5-year needs are going to be with the anticipated growth of the organization.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Any other questions on insurance? And I'm just going to check in with Jeannie. Are we doing a motion and vote on each of these items, or are we looking to kind of go through a discussion of each of these 6 and then have a motion and vote at the end on the package?
I was thinking we'd do it one by one, just so it's very clear what people are agreeing to. And I will also say, I was initially thinking people could just raise their hand, but if we are complying with the Open Public Meetings Act, it needs to be a verbal vote. So I would just call people's names for their vote.
Okay, great. So in order to take vote, if there are no other questions, we need a motion from the board.
I would move to, this is John, I would move to move forward with the insurance pool option and review in 12 months.
Okay, great. So there's been a motion discussion. I see Adrian's hand.
I'm wondering if John would entertain a friendly amendment. I would love to have it say something like the CEO should review it, CEO and staff should review it within 6 months to ensure that we are following using our equity lens to procure insurance and other business as whatever. I mean, I would like to see something about the equity lens included in that, because I think this is a great opportunity to ensure that we are working with businesses that are more reflective of the broader community.
So if I could speak to the friendly amendment, the reason I said 12 months is simply to give time, so it's not the first thing they have to deal with. Yeah. Everything else you said I would agree with 100%, and I would include in there, but I just don't want, it's going to take longer than.
I agree. Thanks, John. I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So the motion, if I heard it correctly at this point, and Harold, I do see your hand, is that we approve the purchase of insurance for a period up to 12 months, but the expectation is that within 6 months, the CEO checks in with the implementation board on the process, an equitable process that they will use to purchase long-term insurance. Harold.
I believe Adrian friendly amendment would cover my concerns.
Great, thank you, Harold. Okay, and Jeannie, do you want a second, or are we ready for voting? Okay, we got a second from Helen, thank you. All right, so you want to call roll and take vote?
Yep, and so I will just call out your name, and if you can just say yay or nay. Pastor Carrie Anderson is not present at the meeting. Nate Caminos.
Yay.
Paula Carvalho.
Yay.
John Chelmanak.
Aye.
Helen Howell,
Aye.
Gordon McHenry Jr.,
Yes.
Harold Odom,
Yes.
Damian Patnod,
Aye.
Adrian Quinn,
Yes.
Michael Ramos,
Aye.
and Sarah Rankin,
Yes.
Simha Reddy,
Aye.
and Juanita Spotted Elk.
Yes.
Okay, so that is 12 members of the implementation board are present, and all 12 of them approved the vote, or approved the motion, and to move forward with purchasing insurance.
Great, thank you, Jeannie. The next one is payroll services. So payroll services will need to be in place before the CEO is hired so that we can pay the CEO and any staff that they hire. The staff work group recommends a short-term 6 to 12-month contract to provide immediate payroll services that could be retained or supplanted after the CFO is in place. ADP, a payroll vendor, is already under contract with King County. Contracting with ADP would allow us to establish this function of the authority quickly without having to issue an RFP. Staff have determined this vendor's rates to be competitive. So I want to see if there are any questions before entertaining a motion and vote.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
I move that the authority or that the implementation board approve procurement of payroll services for a 12-month period from ADP with flexibility for the CEO to make a decision or change sooner based on an equitable process.
Great, thank you.
Harold,
Is there
I'll
a second?
Ms. Harold,
Great, Harold is second. Thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion before we call for vote? All right, Jeannie, you want to call for vote?
Yep, Nate Caminos,
Yeah, aye.
Paula Carvalho,
Aye.
John Chalmenek,
Aye.
I'm gonna like reset my brain on this. Helen Howell,
Aye.
Gordon McHenry Jr.,
Aye.
Harold Odom,
Aye.
and Damian Patnod,
Aye.
Adrian Quinn,
Aye.
Michael Ramos,
Aye.
Sarah Rankin,
Yes.
Simha Reddy,
Aye.
and Juanita Spotted Elk.
Yes.
Okay, and so all 12 members present voted aye for that motion.
Great, thank you. Next item is the CFO Accounting Services. So in order to hire the CEO of the authority must have financial systems in place to pay staff and contractors, establish bank accounts, and set up accounts payable and records management systems. Staff recommends that the contract is established as soon as possible for up to 12 months. The staff work group has explored 2 contractors, Robert Half and Clark Newber. Staff recommend contracting with Robert Half because their services are more comprehensive. So I want to see if there's any discussion ahead of entertaining a motion and votes.
I have a great concern that I would vote for this group only if they were limited to an RFP being sent out through the community so we could have an equitable based lens on this. There might be no one who can compete against them, but we owe it to ourselves if we're going to be changing to put an RFP for a new financial company. I would think just, again, if we keep going over the same people doing the same thing, we're going to have the same outcomes. So I want change, and even if it's in financial services, those changes should be an RFP out.
Just for clarity's sake, Harold, are you proposing that we would not select and contract with account services at this point and instead RFP that out? Or that we would, similar to the other decisions made, we would purchase services for a short term so that we have them in place with the expectation that the CEO, once on board, would conduct an RFP to pick permanent accountants or accounting services?
I'm just, Jason, I would do it even shorter, 3 to 6 month term. This is the crucial part of the regional authority, and I'd want us to have some input on that and make sure there's an RFP out before we chose a firm. This is, again, going to the theory of change. I have nothing against the firm that's out there, but I don't think if we have a competitive RFP, we don't know who else is out there to give us services.
Great, understood. Thank you, Harold. Gordon, I see your hand.
2 questions. I had a question, but I want to seek a clarification from Harold. Harold, when you said 3 to 6 months, would that be 3 to 6 months after the CEO is hired, or 3 to 6 months from the date of this, from today?
Hopefully we have a CEO October or November, but it would be 6 months from the day of hire.
Okay.
Or day of contract.
Yeah, I'm intrigued with Harold's friendly amendment or clarification that it's limited and it'll be less than a year of the prior 2 votes, but 6 months if he's agreeable to that. And then my original question was going to be, Robert Half is the recommendation of staff because they're more comprehensive, and I wanted to just ask if staff, and looking at that, had factored in never mind. I withdraw my question. I think it's been answered, because to Harold's point that whatever we're going to do relatively soon, it's going to be an RFP process, which then allows us to have a more inclusive process, because I'm concerned about both in terms of race equity, also local, making if there's an opportunity to support local business, that we give it to if they're competitive and competent, that it goes to local business.
Great, thank you, Gordon. Sola, you had a comment?
I just wanted to make sure that folks knew or understood that in order to hire the CEO, we need these accounting systems in place. So this is something that has to happen before we can even bring the CEO on, similar to those payroll services. So just a little bit of context. And then one of the things that I wanted to add is in discussions with both Clark Newber and Robert Half, they would have a strong commitment to draw from our current subject matter experts to start to develop some of the systems that are necessary for the authority. So there's a lot of interest in like looking at current staff that are already doing this work and kind of how they utilize them as in support of the systems in place. So I just thought I would add that context, that there's a commitment to hire staff that are knowledgeable currently.
Great, thanks. Nate, I see your hand.
Yeah, thanks. I remember in our last meeting, some of the discussion from other members of the board have come up in regards to making sure that, or looking into the idea of which firms are local and which are not. My understanding, and not having looked at it since our most recent meeting, was that Clark Newber was based in Bellevue fully, while the other firm was based in California but had an office in downtown Seattle. Not sure whether or not that was a clarification that staff was able to seek and understand since our most recent meeting. The other was just as it was presented to us, and as maybe a refresher for myself and the members of the board. The other firm was noted as, Robert Kraft was noted as a firm that it was staff suggestion because they were being more comprehensive in terms of their scope of work for us. Can you get into some detail in terms of ways in which they'll be able to be more comprehensive in manners that Clark Newber could not?
Sure. So first, I did look at a variety of things, and not so much whether Clark Newber or Robert Half were based in the Seattle area, but I also went back to our contracted service providers through the city of Seattle to look at MIMBY, WIMBY focused organizations, so minority-owned business or women-owned business for financial services. And what I found is the majority of those services that are currently under contract with the city and that we could like add a rider onto with would not be able to kind of have the staffing capacity that we need to come in and deliver the volume of work we need to establish this organization in terms of banking services and an RFP allocation of or oversight of all cash management handling practices related to federal fund oversight, and then the establishment of systems of accounts for receivables and payables connected to our contracts tools that are going to need to also be brought on board. So the reason I'm really I think that Robert Half has the skills and tools that we need is that they have done this work in the past, and they can draw from a system of consultants to come in and do this work as quickly as we need them to. They're able to source and place people immediately, and they have folks in the Seattle area that they would place on this project. And then they have a subcontractor called Protiva that they would bring into this work, who is working in Sacramento right now with a similar type of organization that receives federal dollars providing homeless assistance services. So they have some understanding of the oversight and requirement in terms of managing federal funds, which is really can be really complicated. And the regional authority will be receiving not only City of Seattle general fund dollars and King County general fund dollars, but also levy dollars. They'll be receiving federal dollars through HUD, McKinney-Vento Assistance Act, and they will also be getting CDBG, Community Development Block Grant dollars, and ESG funds, Emergency Solutions Grant funds, all of which have significant oversight requirements. And I don't know if some of you are familiar, but the recent CARES Act that passed the federal government issued $29 million in additional ESG funding that is essentially going to end up going to the regional authority and needs to be spent in the next 5 to 6 years and has a significant amount of reporting oversight. And so because of those kinds of moving pieces, I thought initially Robert Half kind of coming in and setting up our baseline system of accounts could be the most successful. Clark Newber also could be a highly competent provider and will have the ability to bring those staff in and quickly set up the authority so that we can bring the CEO on as soon as the recruitment process is completed and be able to launch contracts over to the authority so that the authority can accept funds and start expending them to continue service provider continuity out in our service provider community. And again, this is also something that we look at as a very temporary solution. We want the authority to be able to explore what it looks like to have a CFO or other financial management services, and whether that's a body of work that they hold as an entity or they want to continue to contract that out is something the CEO can come up with and decide once they've had an opportunity to kind of get settled within the organization.
Right, thank you, Sola. So just pulling from the comments, Gordon just offering full transparency that United Way of King County utilizes Clark Newber for audit and financial consulting services. Also see Harold that you have your hand up.
So I'm not combating you. I think you do a great job bringing things to us. But you said something that is down my road that I see happening. We'll say Robert Haas has done this before. He's great. The services are great. They provide excellent services for us. Have we built them up? Have we given them more work because they do this? They started small, and have they relied on city and county contracts to build themselves up to make themselves more competitive, to build themselves up again, to make themselves more competitive. You understand what I'm saying? Because agencies continually build themselves up with county and city money, and then they become the only ones who have that contract. I'm more for putting RFPs out so people who are just starting out, you know, who might not have the capacity, but can take bits and pieces of this contract. Because if Robert Hass is going to contract out to consultants, why aren't we contracting out with consultants as well? I agree with you to start up the new regional authority and hire the CEO. We need these in place, and we need someone competent and can quickly do it. But you see where I'm going with, if we keep the same people and we build them up with city and county money, then they're going to be the only people at the top. We're giving no opportunity for the people who might have great ideas on how to end homelessness, how to help domestic violence, how to help sexual assault. Those agencies are not going to get in if we continue to allow those agencies and those firms that this county and this city have built up with the taxpayer money. Do you understand where I'm going with that?
Yeah, good point, Harold. Thanks for raising it. And I think that, you know, one of the reasons that RFPs are so important is that we can be really clear about the kind of organizations that we want to support and want to see doing this work. Adrian, I see your hands up.
Thank you. Just a question for clarification in terms of sequencing here. Could somebody help me understand why the money and the systems would be brought over to the regional authority before the CEO is on board?
Yeah, the timing. So the CEO, there's going to be, and you may recall there were discussions, I believe, at your first meeting, as well as discussions that took place at the governing committee meeting about some startup dollars that are being moved from the city to the regional authority, so that when the CEO is on board, they have access, immediate access to funds to start building their team and paying for systems. So there's you know, not going to be a whole lot of funding that moves over to the regional authority before the CEO gets there, but there is some startup dollars, some startup money that the city made available, so that when that individual does come into that leadership role, they're not at zero. They do have some money to start building a staff, building systems, making purchases. And so those are the only funds that would go over to the regional authority ahead of the CEO hire. All other investments, such as those that we put out to community-based organizations, would not transition over to the regional authority until the CEO was on board. Another question, Adrian?
Sorry, thanks, Jason.
That's okay.
Yeah, I'm just trying to, I'm thinking about, you know, the comments that have been made to date, and certainly Robert Half or Clark Newber bring a very broad range of services. And I guess the question in my mind is, do we need that broad range of services once we get this, if it's a small amount of money coming over initially, so it's just startup, and then we have the CEO comes on board who can then hire a CFO who in theory would have the skill set to take care of many of these things that have been discussed so far. So I guess I'm a little confused about bringing on an organization that's so broad, if we might have a CFO on board relatively soon as well.
Yeah, I think some of that's a good point, and for this board to consider doing an RFP for financial services earlier than bringing on a CEO, or is I think causes some anxiety around timing, because the financial services need to be there in order for the regional authority to be able to pay the CEO and to also pay for the benefits and services that will also support that first hire. So it's, you know, in my mind, having some kind of fiscal services, financial services in place, at least initially in place, seems critical. But I will also ask Sola if there's anything about the timing that this board should consider ahead of making a decision. And then Simha, I see your hand raised. John, I see your hand raised. Sola?
I would agree with Jason. I think the two items that he has lifted up are really the most critical. And one of the other aspects that we had been planning for was working to have the authority operational by January 1. And there has been a lot of conversation about when contracts shift from the city or the county, but I'll just talk about the city because that's where I'm focused. Transitioning city dollars, the $73 million of city resources to the authority at the beginning of the year. And I've been focused on trying to anticipate that shift has to occur and really wanting the CEO to be set up for success in that they can kind of hit the ground running with this initial startup plan and staffing plan. And then we can quickly pivot to transitioning all of our city resources to the authority so that they can maintain the work that's happening in the community to serve people experiencing homelessness. That's kind of where my focus has been. And if the direction from the implementation board is that we kind of need to slow that down a bit, then I'm happy to follow that instruction. And also just, I think, critical to identify that the authority will have to pay for these initial kind of critical services, the payroll, insurance. The city and the county are not going to do that on behalf of the authority. The authority will have a system of accounts set up to manage some of those things. Banking, RFP, and some of the other services that will be required are pretty extensive and can take a significant amount of time. And so having the resource and experience of a outsourced services firm could really help us speed that along while we look at what our other options are. But I'll stop talking now and see, Seema, if you have.
Yeah. Seema and then John.
Yeah. Actually, my comments were very similar to Sola's. I think the issue of making sure we're choosing people who are local and that we're looking at it appropriately in terms of equity. And I really like Terrell's point about trying to choose, not always going to the business that currently already holds many of the same contracts. I think those are all reasonable and really important points. Right now, I feel like the most important choices that we have as a board are really going to be, in these coming months, choosing the best possible CEO that we can, and who shares our values. And then their choices, and their most important choices in turn will be to choose the staff around them, right? Like the best CEO or CFO. And rather than us trying to do RFPs ourselves or with staff that, we're just getting no now, I would really like to hire a fantastic CEO who can then take time to develop the RFPs that make sense for the organization as they envision it, and as we envision it. So I think the approach we've taken in the last two decisions of saying, okay, here's a reasonable option that will cover our needs for the first 6 months. But in the interim, our expectation is that the CEO on arrival will examine that issue like with every other contract and then make some decisions based on our values for going forward with new RFPs. So my preference would be that we choose one of these reasonable organizations that's been recommended by staff who've researched it, and then with the caveat that the CEO, that we ask the CEO to consider an RFP in 6 months' time to re-examine our use of the services or transition to the CFO. That's great. Thank you.
Whoop, Jason.
Hello.
Some of my screen froze there for a moment.
We can hear you just fine.
Okay. Am I up next?
You are.
Okay, wonderful. The question I have for all of us is, what do we want the CEO working on in the first 12 months of his or her job? That's really the question. I think we need to hold the CEO accountable to the concept of decision-making, of the theory of change. So I agree with Harold on that. But from my standpoint, in the first year that we have a CEO on board, I want them understanding the community. I want them understanding us. I want them to have the time to bring on the best staff possible to make a reasoned decision of whether you have a CFO or whether you have hire a CFO or whether you continue with the firm. And so in all of these questions, I really prefer a longer time frame for the hiring and bringing the people in, and get them going so the CEO can focus on building the organization, because the biggest theory of change is the change on the streets and getting people shelter. And that's what I really want us working on and the CEO working on. So that's kind of my opinion on all of these. In my mind, it's a you pick 'em on the two agencies. I'm familiar with Clark Newber. I'm also familiar with Robert Half. So in my mind, it's move forward. And, I would prefer a longer time frame, not to be hampered by a 6-month, got to make a decision. That's just me.
Thanks, John. Damien?
Yeah, I would just start off by saying that I concur with both John's comments and Simha's, and I would like to offer a motion to at least bring it to the table. And so I move to direct staff to establish a contract of up to 12 months with Robert Half to develop accounting systems in order to facilitate KCRHA operations prior to the hire of a CEO.
Great, so there's a motion. Any discussion? Harold, I see your hand up.
And I will second the motion. So
great, thank you, John.
How strict we're being on Robert's rules, I don't think we should be, but just to get it out.
Thank you. Harold?
For the sake of just getting to know each other and trusting each other, I was going to second the motion, but John, you've already seconded. Somehow you convinced me there to go with the 12 months. I trust Sola. I've worked with her before, and I know she's an overachiever, and that's a good thing for us because she's going to look at all possibilities. So I'm going to go. I would go with the second the amendment that's up. The motion.
Thank you. I do see Gordon. You have your hand up.
Yes, my audio failed right when Damien was making his summary resolution, which was seconded. So I just ask before we vote that there be a restatement of the resolution that we're voting upon.
Great, thanks. Damien, do you mind making your motion once more before we take a vote?
Sure, I move to direct staff to establish a contract of up to 12 months with Robert Half to develop accounting systems in order to facilitate KCRHA operations prior to the hire of a CEO.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Jeannie, can you call for a vote?
Yes. Nate Kamenos.
Aye.
Paula Carvalho.
Aye.
John Chalmanak.
Aye.
Helen Howe. We just can't hear you, Helen.
Sorry, I was muted. Aye.
Gordon McHenry Jr.
Yes.
Harold Odom.
Aye.
Damien Patnod.
Aye.
Adrian Quinn.
Yes.
Michael Ramos.
Aye.
Sarah Rankin.
Yes.
Simha Reddy.
Aye.
And Juanita Spadano.
Can I abstain?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So we have 11 ayes, 1 absence, and 1 abstention.
Great, thank you. So I do want to acknowledge we're a little over time on this agenda item, but I think the last 3, based on discussions at your last meeting, maybe are less controversial or need less discussion. So the 4th item here is on healthcare benefits. In order to recruit and retain a talented pool of employees, the King County Regional Authority will need to provide competitive benefits that are comparable to other public entities, such as the city and the county. It is common for public entities to participate in a pooled benefit option, as it allows them to provide good coverage that is more affordable. Staff researched 2 public health insurance options and determined that the Association of Washington Cities provides the most comprehensive menu of options that would support the King County Regional Homeless Authority, offering a competitive benefit package similar to that available at the city and the county. So I just want to see if there are any questions or comments ahead of a motion and vote.
I move that the authority contracts at the Association of Washington Cities for preparation of the employee benefits.
And I'll second the motion.
Great, thank you, Nate. Thank you, Adrian. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion before vote? Hearing none, Jeannie, can you call roll for a vote?
You're muted. You're muted, Jeannie.
Sorry.
There
Nate.
we go. All right.
Sorry about that. Nate Caminos.
Aye.
Paula Carvalho.
Aye.
John Chelmanek.
Aye.
Helen Howell.
Aye.
Gordon McHenry Jr.
Yes.
Harold Odom.
Aye.
Damien Patnod.
Aye.
Adrian Quinn.
Yes.
Michael Ramos.
Aye.
Sarah Rankin.
Yes.
Simha Reddy.
Aye.
And Juanita Spotted-Elk.
Yes.
Okay, so we have 12 yeas, 0 nays, and 1 person absent.
Thank you. 5th is Social Security. Participation in Social Security is optional for employers if an alternate retirement plan is offered. It also increases labor costs as the employer matches employee contributions. Staff recommends that the authority participate in Social Security as part of a competitive benefits package to attract and retain qualified staff. Any questions or comments? Also could entertain a motion and second.
Gordon so moves, affirming staff's recommendation.
I second.
Great, thank you, Gordon. Thank you, Paula. Any discussion before vote? Hearing none. Jeannie, can you call roll for vote?
Yes, Nate
Aye.
Caminos. Paula Carvalho.
Aye.
John Chelmanek.
Aye.
Helen Howell.
Aye.
Gordon McHenry Jr.
Yes.
Harold Odom.
Aye.
Damien Patnod.
Aye.
Adrian Quinn.
Yes.
Michael Ramos.
Aye.
Sarah Rankin.
Yes.
Simha Reddy.
Aye.
And Juanita Spotted-Elk.
Yes.
So again, we have 12 yeas, 0 nays, and 1 member absent.
Great, thank you, Jeannie. Thank you, board. Last item, retirement system participation. In order to provide a competitive benefits package that attracts and retains qualified employees, the authority will need to offer a retirement plan. As a public entity, the authority can participate in various state-sponsored pension programs. Staff recommend opting into the Public Employees Retirement System, or PERS. PERS would provide authority employees with a significant retirement benefit. It does increase the cost of labor, which would need to be considered in the authority's budget. But we believe this is the best option to support employees in their long-term retirement. Any discussion or questions before entertaining a motion and vote?
I'm happy to move to adopt the staff recommendation that KCRA participates in PERS.
Gordon would second that motion.
Great, thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Gordon. Any discussion before vote? Hearing none, Jeannie, can you call roll for vote?
Yes, I'm going to have your order of your names memorized, and I'll be saying it in my sleep. Nate Cavanos.
Aye.
Yes. Paula Carvalho.
Aye.
John Chelmanek.
Aye.
Helen Happel.
Aye.
Gordon McHenry Jr.
Yes.
Harold Odom.
Aye.
Damien Patnod.
Aye.
Adrian Quinn.
Yes.
Michael Ramos.
Aye.
Sarah Rankin.
Yes.
Simha Reddy.
Aye.
And Juanita Spodadak.
Yes.
And again, we have 12 ayes, no nays, 0 nays, and 1 member absent.
All right, congratulations, board. These are incredibly important decisions and really go a long way to helping to stand up some really key foundational structures that are required to get the regional authority operational. So congratulations. Thank you so much for taking the time needed to get to these votes. Speaking of time, we are past time. So I wanted to check in. We had promised to do some public comment. So I wanted to see Jeannie, Carrie, are there individuals who have signed up for public comment?
Yes, we do. We have one individual who has signed up for a public comment.
Okay, so we may not need the full 10 minutes for the one comment. And so I think a decision in front of the board is, the next conversation we wanted to have was really about implementation board officers. We had sent ahead of time some options for you to discuss. Just as a reminder, per the interlocal agreement, the implementation board is required to elect a chair and vice chair. The briefing memo that we sent lays out several models, and we wanted to facilitate discussion here today in hopes of getting to a place, if you're comfortable, making a motion on one of those structures, and then at your next meeting, really having a discussion about who would fill those roles. So just want to sort of get a pulse check from the group. Do you feel like there is enough time remaining, 10 minutes, for us to have a meaningful discussion about those 4 structures, and allow some time for our one individual to have public comment? Or do you want to kick this to the next conversation or your next meeting? See a hand, Harold?
Yes, Jason. So last meeting we had, there was a discussion about if we're going to have a chair or vice chair. It is up to us. That last paragraph, the last line in the paragraph, does give us, the board, an opportunity to elect a co-chair, 2 co-chairs. I believe we are asking for, excuse me, what would be the benefit of having 2 co-chairs versus having a chair and a vice chair, or vice versa from the staff? I believe that's where we left off at.
Yeah, and that's exactly the discussion we wanted the board to have, is to, there were some proposals that were made in our last meeting staff went back and offered what 4 models could we look at. There's the, as described in the ILA, a chair-vice chair model. There's a 2 chairs and a vice chair model. There's a 2 chairs, 2 vice chair model. There is also a model that would have 2 equal co-chairs. And so this is the discussion that we wanted to have today. My question is really for the board, trying to understand if you feel like you have enough time to have this discussion and come to some level of agreement in the 8 minutes now that we have left on the meeting agenda.
And Jason, we also have to have time for public comment.
Correct, yes.
I would suggest that we don't have time to have a meaningful conversation about the structures in front of us and that subject and accommodate public comment, but perhaps the rest of my colleagues feel differently.
I agree with that. We have 7 minutes and change still left here to be able to try and hash out what will likely be a 30-minute discussion at minimum. Yeah. And so I'm not seeing a deadline or pressure to have our leadership structure in place from now until October 2nd at least. I suggest that we also postpone this discussion until our October 2nd meeting.
I agree.
I would agree on this, Harold. I would motion to table this till next meeting because I'm going to take maybe 20 minutes of the talk. Not really.
Thanks for the heads up, Harold.
Yeah. All right. You know, without chairs or co-chairs or chairs and vice chairs, Leo and I will continue to help facilitate these meetings and keep them going until you have officers who can serve in those roles. But we will kick this to your next meeting. We'll put it at the top of the agenda. We also want to make sure that you have an update on the CEO recruitment process and timeline. So with that, Jeannie, I think we're ready to call for public comment before closing the meeting.
All right, I'll go ahead and take it, Jeannie. Now we'll, sorry about that. Now we'll take public comment. We've set aside 10 minutes to hear from members of the public. If you wish to comment and have not yet typed your name and city into the chat window to be called upon, please do so now. Each individual will be given 2 minutes to comment. I will call on individuals in the order they have been provided and unmute them. I will announce when you've reached your 2 minutes and ask you to finish your comment and call on the next speaker if we have anyone else. I will close the public comment around 10 minutes from now, or if we have no more comments. The public comment period is now open. I'm going to call upon our first and as of now only commenter, which is Bill Curlin-Hackett from Auburn. I'm going to unmute you now. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, and thanks to all of you for serving. You're seeing what a big task you have in front of you. I really liked John's comment asking about when we get to the streets and homelessness. Various groups around the county are wondering what you're doing. I know Leo and Jason are doing an update meeting tomorrow, but frankly, folks are very disconnected. If it weren't for the fact that many of them have contracts, they wouldn't know what to do next. And I think you need to think hard about how you connect to the regions right now before you have regional action plans because right now they're asking folks like me and Alex O'Reilly and others who are listening in on all this to make formal reports back to them about what's going on. Now, it's not that we can't do it, it's you ought to be doing it. And no one really knows who's connected to what part of the region or county of those of you sitting here. So I do hope you talk about that because right now we're a very bifurcated system and we're all very hopeful in you and we're putting a lot of hope in you for new remedies and better cooperation. But I guess right now we feel a little cast adrift. And I'm hoping that you will take that into consideration as you're dealing with all these things that do not seem to pertain to the homelessness you see as well as I see on the streets. So good luck with it, but please find a way to talk to all of us. And thank you, Jason, ahead of time, and Leo for an updated meeting tomorrow. I hope on providing some of this. Whether staff does it or you do it, we need it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And at this time, I see no other public comments. So you may proceed with the rest of the meeting. Thank you for sharing your comments. We've reached the allowed time. If anyone did not have an opportunity to provide public comment and would still like to, I'll leave the chat window open during the next agenda item.
Thank you, Carrie. Let's see, Adrian, I see your hand is up.
Thanks, thanks, Jason. I just am wondering if potentially we could put the agenda item that Bill Curl and Hack had mentioned on our next agenda to have a discussion about how the community will be informed about the work of the implementation board and the progress being made.
Great, we can make that happen.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions before we close the meeting? All right, again, I want to thank you for your time and your service. Thanks for really leaning in and making some critical decisions today. And we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Yeah, and just to confirm, it's noted that we have, we'll have the implementation board officers conversation at the next meeting, as well as informing the community per Adrian's request. And I just want to remind everybody, the next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, October 2nd from 2 to 3:30.
Another agenda is really an update on the CEO recruitment and timeline. Yeah.
I'd just like to thank the staff. I know you guys put in a lot of work, and it's just grateful to have you at our back right now. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, Sola, Jeannie, Carrie. Great work, great support.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.